Hi, I'm Karim. I met Justin about 10 months ago as a result of him looking around for contacts in South Asia. So it was via a friend, and that's how we stumbled into each other and quickly find out about what Rainbow Railroad does and got engaged. I have been out for 33 years, located mostly in Toronto. And in my career, in my lifetime, I've lived in about 10 countries, as well as now having traveled to 115. When you are in those countries, it is sometimes shocking to see the isolation within which some other LGBT people live. So to me, this is not a theoretical kind of an exercise. It's a very down on the ground, empathy for people in those situations. When I met Justin from Rainbow Railroad and I found an organization whose mandate was to look out for people like those whose lives may not be, they may be threatened, and an organization whose mission it is to bring them and enable a transition to a safe place, to me that was very compelling. So the kinds of situations that I would have seen would vary by country, from country to country. When I moved to Russia, actually I was told in no uncertain terms that I should, under no circumstances, talk about my sexuality, okay? And so Russia would be a great example where you can't be vocal. And there are other cases, like cases in Bhutan, where there is such social isolation that people are fearful to talk about it, right? Let alone practice it, let alone express it. There are other situations where people in other parts of South Asia, the Caribbean, they are kicked out of their homes. They are disowned because of their sexuality. I have seen situations actually in Canada and abroad where there is passive aggression at home, and people are almost, the conditions are that if they are gay, they're not welcome, in their family. So the situations around the world vary from being, very socially isolating, right down to kind of eliminating some of the privileges that people would have within their families. So it's pretty severe. So the emotions would vary from being extremely shocked to feeling very sad that people have to go through what they go through just to be able to live the lives that they should be able to live, right? So it's anywhere between, I think, shock, anger, sadness. When I watched that video of that guy who was wearing a lipstick stuck in a Jamaican store, who could not come out of the store for fear of being beaten up, and I think he was in that store for 90 minutes, and I'm going, how can you possibly live your life like that? That's so just not fair, right? You see, it's layered, right? It's layered. Because I think as a country, we have benefited a lot from immigration, from attracting, diverse people. The type of people we want to attract here are not necessarily moneyed people. They are people who don't have the privileges we have. So the segment that Rainbow Railroad is targeting is a very unique segment. And what I personally find attractive about it is it's very tangible. You donate a certain amount of money, you donate a certain amount of your time, and you are actually able to see physical people moving from other parts of the world to a much safer place here in Canada. So to feel that you've played a small role in helping shifting a life from danger to safety is so real, and it's very profound. When I marched last year in the Pride at Vancouver, I marched with an organization very similar to Rainbow Railroad, and I marched with 33 different nationalities, and I just looked around me and I thought, how beautiful is this, that I'm able to look to my left and see someone from Ghana, I'm able to look to my right and see someone from Jamaica, I'm able to look ahead and there's a guy from Montenegro leading the group, and so on and so forth. This is so incredibly rich. Why would I not want to be a part of that magic, right? I think this is very much in keeping with the tradition of largely immigrant community in Canada. So in that way, we're not doing anything different from what we've been doing all the time, right? But I think this adds another element of A, diversity, and B, actually, I'll come back to that later. So to me, this railroad needs to be one that's kind of a global railroad. And so for all the right reasons, so far our focus has been on a few specific countries where we have the connections and the infrastructure. But it is my belief, and I think shared with many others, that we could expand their reach to other parts of the world, and particularly other parts of the world where it's not easy living a day-to-day life being gay or lesbian or bisexual, transgender, right? So to me, there are two components that need to come together. One is the help on the ground that is trusted and reliable help, because we don't know what we don't know. And so we need those connections on the ground to be able to authenticate the cases that come through, number one. And number two, to be able to provide a helping hand to people, whether it's working through the system, translation, whatever it is, right? So we need those people on the ground. Now, the mirror side of it is, I think on the ground here, we need people who have actually lived some of those experiences and walked through some of those bureaucracies, so the expectations on both sides are in sync. And so you need both pieces of the equation to work together. So the engagement of the diaspora becomes an extremely important foundational element as we build the capability for further outreach. So there's multiple ways of donating, right? I think the traditional notion of donating is you donate through your dollars. And as we already talked, the dollars go to a very tangible kind of a cause, right? And so if you look at the Rainbow Report financials, very little of it is administrative. Most of it actually goes to helping cases, right? So that's the financial piece. There are other two elements. One is the time, right? So you give of your time just helping move the cases along, or helping move the fundraising along. And the third one is the skill and the networking. So the way I have, added my 2 cents worth in the last month is through establishing on-the-ground contacts in all of the countries within South Asia. So Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, India. And so just speaking to those people about Rainbow Railroad, and what I'll tell you is it took me literally 2 minutes to explain the purpose of the organization. People were on board. The majority of the responses locally to Rainbow Railroad are very, very positive, and ones that are not is simply because they don't know what Rainbow Railroad is, right? So it's a very simple process of educating, but I think the cause speaks to many, many different people. And the more you've lived in the LGBT community in Toronto, I think the more empathic you become to trying to make a small difference to people who actually don't have some of the same benefits and privilege that we have here. So I personally tend to believe that the lens that I look through is a global lens of a global community where we're kind of one band, one tribe. And even if you assume that just 1%, only 1% of the $6 billion people in the world are self-acknowledged gay, and self-expressed, then that's 100 million people. And in the however many countries we have, how many of these 100 million people are able to live lives that are fully expressed socially, and so we're just, it's a needle in the haystack, right? When you start to help one individual after one individual, and the ocean is very wide, right? Of the opportunity that's out there. So I do subscribe to the notion that we are a global community. There's a certain responsibility we bear to that global community. I subscribe to the notion that if people like myself don't play an active role, I don't know who we could look to play that active role. And I subscribe to the notion that there is a global movement, that we do have responsibilities at the government level as well as individuals. My hope, and this may be beyond my lifetime, my hope would be that we actually do have eyes and ears on the ground in as many countries in the world as possible, so that a case could come from, again, pick a country, okay, from Papua New Guinea, or a case could come from, some other South American country, that we have the wherewithal to be able to galvanize and those resources on the ground and to be able to help that person. My hope would be that we're able to do that with a filter which is not a filter that's based on circumstance, meaning, we know people in certain countries so we can work there, but it's based on a much fairer, broader system where you're able to look at the highest need cases in the world. My hope would be that the organization expands. My hope would be that we would lobby at the federal level as well for more funding, for recognition of some of the causes and some of the efforts that we're putting out. Those are some of the hopes that I have. Rainbow Railroad is, right now it's a 1ED engine and a whole bunch of supporters, right? So to think about how we would combat systems and prejudices and structures that are so pervasive, like the ones in the US, right, as we just talked about, to me is, I don't know that that's a conversation I want to have. I almost want to be blind to some of that hatred, because we could spend all of our time combating that complete homophobic engine that's out there. I understand that there's a conference happening in Utah, right? The World Family Conference, where the governor is speaking up, against gays and lesbians around the world and so forth. So there is a tremendous amount of negative energy, and I don't know that with the strength and the muscle that we've got within Rainbow Railroad, we want to tackle those forces head on, right? It's almost better to just kind of work despite some of those negative forces, because otherwise it could be just a very spiraling, negative, time-consuming effort. So Rainbow Railroad, to me, is a no-brainer charity, right? Because it's transparent, you know exactly where your money goes, and it's very tangible. You can see where the money goes and what lives it's saving. See, when you look at Rainbow Railroad, it's just been around for even less than 10 years, and look at the impact it's had, right? So my hope in the next 10 years would be to amplify our reach, such that we're globally accessible in almost every country that we could potentially get a case in. Having actually lived in some of the countries where the notion of gay doesn't even exist in people's vocabulary, right? I have lived in those countries. The sense of isolation, despair, loneliness that I have felt, I would never want anyone else to feel it. After I have come out, I have traveled to countries where people are not able to come out to their families for fear of persecution, for fear of being disowned. There are situations where there's abuse happening because someone is somewhat a little bit more feminine. There are situations where people are forced into marriage. And so all of these are just unnecessary, in the world that we're in today. So I think we can play a very active role in finding those most extreme cases and lending them a helping hand.